Okay. All good. We've got a fancy title, but tonight we're going to end up talking about aircraft enhancement or aircraft scatter. But that really depends a lot about ADS-B these days if you want to be successful. So what we're going to talk about is aircraft enhanced propagation or aircraft scatter. I'm quickly going to go through and talk about what ADS-B is in a fairly high level. And I'm going to talk about flight aware, PI aware. And then we'll talk about how you can do it yourself at home. And it's not that hard. And talk a little bit about AirScout, which is a program which has been written by an AMBA over in Europe, which really takes all the hard work out of aircraft tracking. The important thing is to know where the aircraft is, so you're not wasting your time. And there's a little bit of information about how to move forward. Incidentally, before I started tonight, I set up an ADS-B receiver here. There's a small antenna that's wedged in between the desks that you'll see out front, and there's a Raspberry Pi computer and a small SDR receiver connected up, and we're receiving ADS-B signals now, and it's going out on the internet, joining into the flight aware system. So there's actually data coming out right now, going live around the world, and it's not hard to do. Hey, a lot of it's duplicated, and I'll talk about that, and it's duplicated for a very good reason. Basically, aircraft enhancement, there's two ways you can do it. You can go from B to A, which is an aircraft approaching you. You can get an aircraft mid-path between A and B, and you can catch a scatter off an aircraft going away from you, going from sort of B to A, the one on the right-hand side. And what that means is you're going to get Doppler shift with frequency. Don't see it so much when you're in higher or lower frequencies, but as you move up to VHF, UHF, and above, Doppler becomes quite an issue, and it's something which is not easily. Yep. And it's something to be aware of, particularly if you're going to start using programs like WJT SX for using some of the weak signal modes, and you know, Kevin's well experienced with that, with a record. It's essential to be aware of the Doppler shifts. Aircraft enhanced propagation or scatter is a little bit like EME. You're using an aircraft as a passive repeater, with EME using the moon as a passive repeater. Of course, the moon at 360,000 kilometers away is a lot further away than any aircraft we're going to encounter, but it's also a much bigger target. So when you're coming down to looking for an aircraft, you really need to know where it is, make sure it's in the right position so you can get the reflection from the aircraft. And that's where we're wanting to locate it. In the past, they sort of use active radar, where you ping a radio signal off the aircraft. That's still there, but these days the ADS-B is the modern equivalent of it. And basically, in a nutshell, you've got your GPS, GLaSSNOS or Galileo transmitters giving you your location. Aircraft receives that, then transmits it back down to receivers on the ground. So the aircraft knows where it is and it's telling everyone where it is. It's broadcasting it. That's where the B in the ADS-B comes from. There are several public ADS-B traffic networks out there. I've put a few of them up. The one I'm going to talk about tonight is the flight aware system. I started playing around and getting interested in this a couple of years ago, and the one which caught my eye was flight aware, and probably it's the most sophisticated system out there. Others would probably argue there's some which are a little bit more sophisticated, but this one's not bad, and you can certainly get into it very easily if you're a receiver using a Raspberry Pi and an SDR. The interesting thing is, once you join up for flight aware, and there's instructions on how to do it online, it's not exactly hard to follow, you automatically become an enterprise user. And the neat thing about that is it's normally about $100 a month US, $1,200 US a year. So it's pretty expensive if you wanted to buy it, but it's a little bonus if you start feeding into the system. And there's lots of things you can get on the system. If you're a pilot or into like an aero club or something like that, this sort of stuff would be gold. For me as an amateur, it's just something interesting and gives me something to watch as I listen around the band. And that's a typical screen sort of Australia of the traffic that you'll see on the main system. And of course, the bits that you've got there, power supply, some cables, an antenna, your SDR and the Raspberry Pi itself. A lot of people will put it in a box and put it all up at the antenna, up in the air. My system at home, I've got it about 10 meters up in the air. I've got an active antenna up there, which gives me about 20 dB gain. About 10 meters of LMR 400 runs down to a hairpin filter, another 20 dB amplifier after that, then it goes into the SDR. And I regularly decode signals out beyond 400 kilometers. And I wouldn't say that I've got a particularly good QTH, but you know, if you get the kit up high, it's amazing how far you can go. The frequency all this happens on is 1280 megahertz. Sorry, 1090, not 1280, from 1090 megahertz. Okay. That's my home system, which I'm pulling off the internet now. You get a lot of statistics about your coverage area. That's the coverage map. Out to the east and generally down to the southeast, that's going out as far as 400 kilometers. Most of the ones, most of the decodes are in closer, but as you get further out, your frequency drops off. You get a lot of stats about how many you pick up. They give you a total rank globally. So far this month, I've done over 3 million Mode B GPS positions of flight aware. And the other neat thing you can get to do is go through and look at your live data feed. Now that can't do that one here because it's off your local network and it's going to come back and give me nothing. But if I go back and choose the receiver here, we can see we're getting some decodes. And if I go on to the live feed, it's not going to give it to me. Oh, Murphy works well. I'll continue on. That's the screen that I've captured earlier from home. What we can do after the presentation, we can fire it up without going out on Zoom, and I'm sure we'll get it all working then. The interesting thing is you can actually track the location very accurately, but this is what you receive only, not what everyone else is receiving, which is a good thing because as you go out onto the internet stream, you run into latency. And what that is you're getting the data, you're feeding it out into a server on the internet, they're collating the information from all the others, then refeeding it. And that all takes time. And one of the things I've noticed is you can get up to a couple of minutes of latency on where the aircraft is, which you might think, oh, it's not a big deal. But if you're doing a marginal track and trying to reflect off an aircraft and it's a marginal path, the aircraft could be out of the zone before you even start transmitting. And you're wondering why you're not getting any contacts. And it's simply because you're a little bit too late. You're getting the information about where the aircraft is too late to make a contact. And one of the deals with the latency too, it's with they use a system called multilateration, which is basically like a fox hunt on steroids. For a normal fox hunt finding a hidden transmitter, you take two bearings and work out exactly where it is. This will be the intersection of the two bearings. With a plane in the sky, especially up in the air several thousand feet, I mean, traveling several hundred kilometers an hour. So trying to track that's a real issue. But with multilateration, you've got multiple receivers and they work it on a time difference. And by the delay and the time that each one receives, they can work out the location in 3 dimensions. And you'll see a lot of the decodes you will get will be MLAT decodes based on that. The other interesting thing about doing your own receiving is you can bypass filtering because you're receiving it directly. So there's no filtering done at the host server. And this screen here shows an interesting decode. And you'll notice the particular aircraft's going around doing circles out off the Pacific Ocean there. You know, what is that, you know? Well, you can go through and have a close look and see what the aircraft is. And pretty clearly what the aircraft is and what they're doing out there. Some of those sort of details, if you go from the public filtered system, you won't find it. They're switched off. What's yeah, it's a refueling tanker. Yeah. Oh, okay. Oh, there we go. Quite often you won't see them. They'll be either filtered out or they'll have their ADS-B transmitter turned off. That's not unusual to find a military aircraft flying along, and all of a sudden they'll hit the switch and it'll disappear. The other network I want to talk about is the Open Sky Network, and it does a similar function to FlightAware. However, you can see it's the screen there is not as comprehensive, a little bit simpler. And the interesting thing about this work, it's a non-profit network. It's run out of Switzerland, whereas the FlightAware system is very much commercialized. And no, it's as far as I'm aware, it's a straight in. It picks up receivers and then puts it straight out with very little filtering going on, if any. The good thing about this one, though, is there's a software out there called AirScout, and so, I know some of us have used it. It's basically written by Frank DL2ALF, and it does all the hard works about working out where the plane is and whether you've got coverage on it. I've put this one in as a sample, which I'll run through later on. And I did earlier this morning, let it run for 10 minutes and I captured 2 passes in the hotspot. Basically, that's the my QTH, and that's down at Sydney at VK2RSY. There is a spot in the middle where, in theory, you'd be able to get a reflection on 2 meters. It's a long path, and you're very much in a weak signal area. Both places can see it. That's using SR1. Yeah. The interesting thing with AirScout, it uses the Open Sky Network to pull its data in. So all these plane locations are coming out of Open Sky. I haven't worked out a way of getting FlightAware to feed directly into it, but it goes into Open Sky. And the other interesting thing is to note is if you just get AirScout and fire it up, it'll work for a little while, then it'll stop bringing in the planes. Unless you're registered to use instances of it, if you're not. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's what's here. The other thing which I think is a little bit different to what they say, and is if you feed your Raspberry Pi receiver into their network, which isn't hard to do, you get more than 1,000. I had this running all day today, and I had more than 1,000 coming down, and I didn't drop out. So if you join their network and feed into it, you got pretty much a unfiltered access to tracking where the planes are. Yeah, I'm doing it to both. It goes to FlightAware or FireWare, and dual feed. Yep. It's not hard to set up. It's the same system. It's just a couple of lines of code. Okay, I'm going to try and play a video now. I came across a good presentation by Tim, G6GEI, who did a presentation to another group, and he did a pretty good talk about AirScout and how it worked. I'll see if I can get that up.
So you saw a brief shot of the AirScout screen earlier on the video. This is what it looks like when you're running it. When you're entering the station that you're interested in this case it's PE1EWR, it will plot the path between you and the station you want to work. The path will be coloured, and the bright purple bit of the path is the viable airspace where you can get an aircraft signal. So in my case here, anywhere along the path is viable. It's a very good route between my location and PE1 EWR. The triangle here is pretty much most of the airspace, and the little plane here is indicating, well, it tells you what the type of plane is, how long it is until that plane is viable. So the 0 minutes here is indicating that it's viable now. The squint is how far in degrees and minutes off the actual bearing to the other station the plane is. So obviously the smaller the squint, the nearer to the path that it is. The altitude here is shown right in the middle of the usable hot area. So this is a really good opportunity that we're looking at on this one. The planes are color coded, so pink, the bigger the plane, the more likely it's going to get a bounce. The grey ones are planes that are in range but of no interest because they're not flying in the direction of the path. The red ones are the ones that will be viable. So if they carry their current course, they're going to cross the path, and if you click on them, it will tell you how long before they get there. So that's the sort of graphical thing, and as you run this, you'll see the planes moving in real time. It's quite intriguing to watch. As I said, you can watch multiple stations. So if I know these two guys are on the air talking to people, I can multi-select and say I'm interested in these two stations, and it will watch them both for me simultaneously. And in this case, it's saying F4HRD isn't currently viable, but F1CBC is, and here's the plane. And he's viable now, but there's actually another one that's going to be crossing shortly, and two more down here that are coming. So F1CBC is probably a fairly good chance, and there's nothing flying around that's going to give us a contact with F4HRD anytime soon. The other thing that's annoying is you'll find sometimes you're just getting ready to work something and the plane disappears off the map, and the explanation there is the damn thing's landed, which happens far too often. It's very annoying. But obviously you know where the airports are, so you know if it's going to touch down at Gatwick, you're not going to get the opportunity to work in. So as I said before, you need to set up AirScout, and the first thing you do is get your grid coordinates in as accurately as you can. So if you look up your latitude and longitude either from a GPS or get it off Google Maps or something, and it will calculate your Maidenhead locator. So we normally only worry about the first 6 digits, but if you can get it accurate, then AirScout will work it out to 10 digits. Then for each band that you're going to work, you tell it as much as you know about your antenna system. So how high is your mast? What's the gain of the antenna, and how much power are you putting into it? And then it can use that to do the maths to work out the likelihood of getting a signal that the other station is going to hear. Equally, and I don't normally do this, but you can put in details about the remote stations if you know them. So obviously the more it knows, the better the accuracy of its predictions. So if you know that information, you can enter it here again for each station. So this is a per band, and this is a per station per band thing that you need to enter. You need to activate AirScout in network server mode. This is so that the KST app can communicate with it. And the things you need to note are the name, which you just leave the defaults as AS, and the port number. So you need to make a note of those because you're going to tell KST that's how it finds AirScout. If you wanted to, and you've got multiple PCs, you could share one AirScout between them. So something for us to consider for contest day, maybe field day. You don't have to use KST with AirScout. You can use it on its own, but then you've got to maintain the list of other stations yourself. So I suggest you use it with KST. You tick the box, and then everybody that's logged into KST will be available to you to select in AirScout.
Once we get out of Zoom, I'll be able to show the data being received here and play around a bit more, but it's not really picking up the internet feed like the rest of multilateration. That's where it picks up signals from several receivers, works out the time difference, and works out the location. Yeah. What I've tried to show here is you can use ADS-B to work out the aircraft location, which is very important to working out whether you're going to have any potential at all of doing a reflection. And it's not that hard to do. A simple Raspberry Pi setup, and for around about $100, you can set yourself up at home and get online. There's a lot of interesting stuff to see off the ADS-B receivers. And of course, if you want to go through and use aircraft enhancement and have a go at doing some aircraft scatter propagation and contacts, it's essential to work out where everyone is. Well, that's it for me.